Hello and welcome. If you're looking for writing inspiration and bookish chat, you've come to the right place with me, Wayne Kelly, bringing you author interviews, writing inspiration and advice since 2014. This week I'm joined by Stefan Mohamed, author of The House on Utopia Way. Stefan has published award-winning YA and speculative fiction, but in this conversation we dive into his surreal cyberpunk noir detective novel and the winding road that took him from traditional publishing into the world of self-publishing. We also cover the frustrations of the current publishing landscape and why writing communities are so important for keeping creative momentum alive. But first, here's a quick catch-up from me. I'm still beavering away on the non-fiction book and I'm enjoying the different challenge that's giving me, allowing me to stretch certain writing muscles I don't always get to use. As mentioned before, I've had to embrace my planning side, or rather develop a planning side and then embrace it, but I've really enjoyed the process so far. In addition to having to shape a narrative and think about my own writing journey, I've also been having to revisit the podcast archive for guest quotes, and even if I do say so myself, interviewing people on here for more than 10 years has given me a massive treasure trove of knowledge and inspiration. It's definitely given me the boost that I needed to make my way through this first draft, and I think, or hope, it'll connect with many of you when the book is eventually released as well. It's also a reminder to me that regardless of how successful an author has been, many of them still share the same moments of self-doubt and all of the other frustrations that many of us experience, both in the actual writing but also along the road to publication. I've definitely noticed how traditional publishing has changed in the time that I've been putting the podcast out, and I know loads of traditionally published authors now are growing frustrated as well on a number of levels, whether that's how much money they're not making, the amount of time it takes for the books to come out, the lack of control they have, and loads of other things. And it's one of the many reasons I eventually decided to take the indie publishing route myself, and why I now offer help and advice and technical assistance and all that kind of stuff to other authors, many of whom either have been or still are traditionally published, but now they want to put out some books under their own steam. Actually, at the minute, I'm just finishing off 6 different books, so it's what I've been spending a lot of my time on for the past few weeks. And they range from non-fiction to literary fiction and even a children's horror book. So I've got experience in cover design, book layout, and all of the technical side of the actual kind of publishing process, which is why a lot of these books will be coming out under my Picklock publishing imprint. But I don't do the usual vanity or the hybrid publishing trick of then taking a cut of an author's royalties. I just help them to create the book, get it published, and then I just basically hand it over to them. And a lot of these big vanity publishers, they charge an absolute fortune, and then they also take a cut of your royalties, which really hacks me off. It's like they're getting the author to pay twice. Either way, I get a thrill out of helping other writers get their books out into the world, and it's definitely something that's been keeping me busy for the past couple of months. Each book's different, and I'm just looking forward to seeing what lands on my desk next. I suppose that might even be one of your books, if self-publishing is interesting to you, but you don't know where to start or whatever. If you are interested, you can check out picklockpublishing.com, which will take you through to my website, WKW Productions, if you want any more info about that. But aside from that, I've also been talking to one of my writer friends this week who's been struggling with creative burnout. He feels like he should be writing something every day. It's almost like a compulsion. He has to make that happen, regardless of whether he's actually passionate about what he's writing or even if he's got an active project on. And that can mean that he ends up working on something he doesn't really believe in, or at least something that's not really quite ready to write yet. So I suggested something that I've done in the past when I felt the same. I've mentioned it on here before more than once, but it's the idea of morning pages or journaling or free writing or however you want to look at it. You don't have to do it in the morning and you don't have to write a journal. In fact, often the more loose and free you are in terms of what you write, the better it is in some ways. And if you want, you can just begin by writing something like, I've got no idea what I'm going to write today or even why I'm doing this, but I'll just keep writing and I'll see what happens, or whatever you want to write. But it's a good way to get started. And what you'll find is that before you know it, you're getting all your worries, your creative blocks, or anything else that might be clogging up your creative brain. You might even start tackling some of the thorny plot problems or whatever it is that you've been mulling over, or maybe even just venting about somebody at work. It doesn't matter. You can either set yourself a minimum time limit or just a word or page target, just something to aim for with no pressure. and it relieves you of the need to just write for the sake of it. And when I last did it, it definitely re-energized me and helped me find my way back into the project that I'd been struggling with at the time. So if you're struggling, give it a try and let me know how you get on. You can obviously do that by dropping me a line to wayne@waynekellyWrites.com. That's WAYNE. I'd love to hear from you, and as I've said before, I always reply. So let's get on to today's interview. So Stefan Mohamed is an award-winning writer originally from mid-Wales and now based in Bristol. His debut novel, Bitter 16, won the Sony Reader Award and went on to launch a trilogy with Salt Publishing. Alongside his fiction, Stefan works as a freelance writer, editor and events organiser, and his latest book, which we're talking about today, The House on Utopia Way, is available everywhere and it's out right now. So enjoy the chat, and I'll pop back at the end just to wrap things up. Okay, Stefan, thanks so much for coming on to The Right Place, or being in the right place. So first of all, just tell us where you're speaking from and give us a sense of how things are going in your writing world at the minute.
I'm talking to you from Bristol, where I work from home, doing various sort of mostly writing related stuff, but also a bit of events, a bit of DJing, just various sort of freelance bits and pieces. The my new book has been out for just over a month, so I'm sort of in the sort of slightly odd post-publication stage where it sort of feels like everything's building up to publication and then it's out, and then suddenly you sort of kind of got to recalibrate and work out, right, what do I need to do next to kind of keep the momentum up and stuff like that. So it's the more kind of like the promotion and marketing side of things, which
the hardest bit, I always think.
Yeah, definitely not my favorite, I have to say.
No, I don't think there's many writers who think it's their favorite, but I know what you're saying. I think the big thing is, as you say, I think whether you're traditionally published or whether you're self-published or whatever, I think there's always this big, in your mind, there's always this big date looming that this is the release date, this is when it comes out. But really, that's just like another date, because then once it's out, that's when the kind of the real work begins and you're having to talk about it and get it out there. So why don't you tell us about that book? Is it The House on Utopia Way? Is that right?
That is the title, yes. So it is a surreal sci-fi detective novel. It's got sort of cyberpunk elements. Interestingly, the cyberpunk thing, I hadn't sort of written it as cyberpunk. That wasn't really in my head when I was writing it. But then showed it to a friend of mine, a writer called Stark Holborn, who wrote the Factors sequence. And various other things. She's brilliant. And it was actually, she gave me a quote and she said it was the best cyberpunk book that she'd read in years. And I was like, oh, interesting. I hadn't thought of that at all, but it actually makes a lot of sense. It's set in a fractured reality, where kind of consensus reality is broken down and communication is broken down. So everybody is living in these little sort of siloed off neighborhoods where they each have their own different interpretation of reality, basically, and people in different neighborhoods don't really communicate, and for a lot of people, going between neighborhoods causes intense psychic damage. So they either don't try or they just forget that other areas exist entirely. And then the main character in that is a detective who has a bit more awareness and is able to sort of move between the different neighborhoods, which enables him to solve mysteries. And he is asked to search for a missing girl, but first he's got to work out whether the girl actually ever existed in the first place, because often in this city people disappear, entire neighborhoods disappear, or people just invent other people out of whole cloth who were never there in the first place. So sort of lots of layers of weirdness that he has to navigate before he can actually start solving the mystery, or working out if there is even a mystery to be solved.
It sounds great. So it sounds like, as well as all the sci-fi and the cyberpunk and everything else, there's also a kind of strong kind of crime noir in there as well, with the classic detective kind of thing going on there.
Yeah, there's definitely a sort of a noir feel, which wasn't something I'd really experimented with before, but was really, really fun thing to integrate. And actually, the sci-fi and the noir worked. Obviously, I'm not far from the first person to have worked this out, but the two thread together really nicely. I think certainly in a lot of like the classic noir films, they take place against this sort of a world that feels fundamentally kind of broken, like morally bankrupt, and these detectives are trying to hold on to sort of the last few shreds of their ethics as they navigate these seedy sort of
Yeah.
underworlds. And so having a kind of a reality that was fractured in a science fictional cyberpunk kind of way sort of kind of fulfilled the same role in terms of backdrop. And also that kind of character and structure is familiar for readers. I think even if you haven't sort of watched or read much detective noir, it's an immediately familiar kind of set of archetypes and tropes, which meant that it was a useful delivery device for some of the weirder stuff. Because
Sounds a
you've always,
bit Blade Runner as well in kind of setup,
yeah,
because that's got elements of the noir thing going on there as well.
yeah,
I'm
definitely.
trying to solve the mystery. Well, sounds great. So, what was the kind of jumping off point for you, Stefan, when you originally came up with the idea?
With this one, I can pinpoint it pretty directly, which is not always the case. It was way back in 2016, and it was when there was first a lot of chat about kind of online radicalization and sort of troll farms and sort of misinformation being spread in a very targeted and organized way to sort of send people in a particular direction. Obviously, luckily, that's all no longer an issue now. Very much of the
Oh
past.
yeah, everything's fine.
Not a going concern at all. It hasn't like fundamentally shifted the world on its axis.
No.
But I found that as well as being quite terrifying, I found it a really compelling jumping off point for a story. Really, what would it be like to live in a world where sort of taking it further than its logical conclusion, where everybody is basically living in their own version of reality. But I sort of wanted to use it as a backdrop and a jumping off point rather than as a sort of a state of the world kind of piece. It is definitely it seems to have got more topical, which I guess is sort of useful in terms of marketing. But I didn't sort of want it to be a statement piece. I just thought it was an interesting backdrop, and it meant that I could really dive headfirst into this idea of conflicting realities and have some that are fairly mundane and some that are really, really out there, and just have lots of ideas all melting together in this huge city that seems to go on forever. So that was the jumping off point, and then it was a matter of sort of trying to work out once I had the vague idea of the world and the situation, sort of what kind of character would make sense to navigate that. And detective was the first one that really came to mind, and that seemed to make the most sense. Who might have the kind of awareness and wherewithal to navigate a world that makes no sense.
And as you say, kind of an outsider in lots of ways, but also able to slip from one thing to another, kind of
Yeah.
expected, yeah, to do that. Brilliant. So science fiction, what is it that draws you specifically to science fiction, would you say?
I think the opportunity to play with sort of out of the box ideas, and one thing that I've always really enjoyed is putting a fairly normal seeming character into an abnormal situation. And psychologically, I think that's a really interesting thing to play with. What does a person who's fairly recognizable, who you could probably have a conversation with in real life, what is it like for them to be thrust into a situation that is completely bizarre or fantastical, and what does that do to you psychologically, and sort of tracking that in terms of character arcs. It means you can kind of play with very out there concepts, but keep it psychologically fairly grounded. And grounded is one of those kind of buzzwords that gets thrown around a lot when anyone's trying to make something sort of give something a bit of gravitas, or be like, we're not being too silly, like they always do with superhero films. Like, we're not being too silly.
Yeah.
I think that era is past a bit now, which is good. But yeah, being able to explore really weird, strange concepts, but keep it still fairly character based, has generally been my interest in my writing.
Yeah. Well, on that subject, just take us back in time a little bit. How did you come to writing in the first place? Give us a sense of a bit about your background anyway. Where did you grow up, and how did you get into writing?
I grew up in Mid Wales. I was born in London, and then we moved to Mid Wales when I was very young. And I was a pretty voracious reader from quite a young age. And then I really enjoyed writing stories at school. That was one of the elements of the school that I, I just jumped into the most. And then I used to, when we went to go and visit my maternal grandma, she had a little electric typewriter that I was really fascinated by, and I used to just like tapping away and writing sort of little stories on that. And then I was given a really old, creaky Amstrad processor. I don't know if you
Yeah,
remember
I
the
do remember those. Yeah.
all in green.
Yeah.
And yeah, lovely clunky old boxy thing. I think it used to belong to another grandparent. And having that in my room, I was just writing stories all the time, and I learned to touch type pretty quickly. And I realized that I could type. When I was writing by hand, I was my handwriting couldn't keep up with what I wanted to be
Yeah,
writing
I
about.
found that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and my handwriting has never really recovered as a result.
No, neither is
Um,
mine. I'd make a
but
good doctor.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, even now, like when I'm signing books, like but the signature on book number one and book number 10, they're completely they might as well have been written by different people. So once I had that, I was just off writing all the time and starting endless novels and never getting really past chapter one, but writing lots of short stories and poems. And luckily, the primary school that I went to, the teachers, it was sort of back when I don't know, feel like creativity was sort of nurtured a little bit more, and so I got a lot of support when they could see that the writing side of things I was really passionate about. So I got a lot of support and encouragement at home as well. And yeah, it just very sort of quite quickly became the thing that I really wanted to do.
And how did you find? I mean, obviously, it's great to know what you wanted to do, and obviously you're passionate about it. At what point did you think, well, this would be something I want to pursue and I want to write novels and all that side of it? And did you find that you could get into that relatively quickly, or like a lot of us, did you have to take a great big circuitous route to get there?
A mixture. I don't really remember ever really wanting to do anything else. I don't think. I mean, I'm sure I had like the I want to be a pirate phase, or I want to be a superhero
Yeah.
phase when I was very little. But in terms of thinking about the future and about jobs and things, I think writing is really the only thing I ever thought seriously about pursuing. So I wrote the first draft of my first novel when I was 16. That was the first time I actually managed to get through a draft of a novel, and that became my first published novel, which was called Bitter 16. And then I studied creative writing at Kingston University. Um, Again, didn't really consider studying anything else. It just seemed to be the thing to do, and like luckily my parents were very supportive of that, and I was able to get sort of a bursary and stuff, which I'm not sure is quite so available these days. And then I carried on working on the novel that I'd already drafted and a couple of other things at uni, and just sort of having the time to sit and write and think about writing and talk about writing was really valuable. And I learned that university was really where I learned the importance of editing and critical feedback, which is I think it's a slightly painful process for all of us, learning that actually sometimes you need to listen to criticism and try and take it on board, because I used to be very, very precious. And if anybody sort of gave me any negative feedback, I'd either sort of have a strop and think, oh, you clearly just didn't get it, or a massive crisis of confidence and think, oh, I'm a terrible writer, or I should never do this again, which I'm sure is familiar to any writers listening. And then just out of uni in 2010, I entered the unpublished version of Bitter 16 into a competition, and ended up winning, which
Brilliant.
it was called the Sony Reader Award. It was a short-lived extra category of the Dylan Thomas Prize, sponsored by Sony's e-reader. Which, and if you're listening to this and you're thinking Sony made an e-reader, that's why it was a short-lived category, because it absolutely got its lunch eaten
Well,
by the Kindle.
I was just going to say everything's been killed by the Kindle, really, in the
Yeah.
e-reader space.
But it was they were kind enough to sponsor that award for 1 year, and so I'm the sole recipient. Which was great just in terms of sort of the validation. And there's also a
Yeah,
cash prize, which meant that I could put off getting a job for a bit and focus on writing. But it also opened some doors in terms of getting an agent. I actually had something concrete that I could put in my submission email. So that was really valuable. So one of the bits of advice I always give to aspiring writers is enter as many competitions as you can. Because even if you don't necessarily win, you might just end up on the right person's radar. Because so much of, certainly in the traditional publishing industry, so much of it is getting in front of the right person at the right time. And a lot of that is somebody else maybe forwarding you on or doing any introduction or something like that.
hmm
So yeah, that was a really useful starting point. But even then, it still took us a good few years to get Bitter 16 placed with a publisher, even with the sort of kudos of having won the prize. Because it was I just was 16 years old and writing a book. So I wasn't thinking I'm writing YA, but because I was writing about a
sure,
16
yeah, yeah.
protagonist.
You were the audience for it at
Yeah,
the time.
exactly.
Yeah,
That was what I knew. So when we came to be actually submitting it, it was like, right, we're submitting it as a YA novel. But sort of YA publishers were saying, oh, it's a little bit mature and adult for YA, and then adult publishers were saying, oh, it's too YA for adults. So it was falling in this kind of awkward hinterland,
mm,
which was quite tricky to navigate. Because if someone tells you, oh, this isn't a very good book because
yeah,
the characters
yeah,
are not compelling, or the story arcs, or the plot, or there's something concrete there. But when they were all saying, "Oh, we love this, but we don't know what to do with it,"
yeah,
so that was sort of my first taste of how finishing the book is like only the first. It's not even the top of the mountain. It's like base camp, really.
yeah, yeah,
And then there's so much more to navigate, and sort of frustrating kind of labyrinthine things to navigate. But we eventually got it placed with Salt Publishing, who were a smaller indie who didn't tend to put out that sort of book. So they were kind of having a first crack at doing YA, which meant that I had a sort of different experience, I think, than other writers I know who went with larger publishers. I had a bit more input in terms of like the cover design and stuff like that, which was nice. Um, and yeah, so we put out Bitter 16 and its two sequels, and then I had one more book with Salt. That was over a 4 year period, pre-COVID. And then a quite long period of trying to get something else off the ground, not really wanting to stick with YA, but because that is moving from one niche to another is another thing that is pretty challenging in traditional publishing.
sure.
And finding, and also because this book, House on Utopia Way, being quite weird, also getting a lot of sort of similar stuff from publishers saying, "Oh, I really like this, but
No idea where to put it.
no idea what to do with it."
That
Yeah.
that's a yeah. I mean, something you hear, even with my book's crime, but I heard the same thing two or three times. Just because it's not a straight, it's not a police procedural. It's a little bit American, although it's British and it's local. And I had the same sort of thing. But I think really I mean, especially like my book is not really way out there. But I think it just kind of shows that, if anything, I mean, the traditional publishing world has always been fairly conservative, but I think now it's gone really, really conservative, and everyone's looking for safe bets, which is obviously partly why we've got this growing trend of just more and more either it's IP that's already out there and they're just building on the top of that, or
Mm.
it's celebrities,
Yeah.
which has gone. I
Yeah.
know that's always been a thing, celebrities, but God, it's gone.
Anyone who can come in with some kind of pre-existing brand
Yeah,
recognition, and yeah, I could sound off about the celebrity author trend for hours, but you sort of don't want to risk coming across as bitter. But then you see these huge deals being
Mm.
announced, like it just wild numbers being thrown around for people who probably really don't need that
It's
amount of
kind
money.
no,
And you
it's
think
kind of
how,
a
how, how many sort of mid-career authors could be supported a bit better,
I agree.
those sorts
It's
of
it's both
investments.
in the advance, but it's also in the amount that gets spent on the marketing and
Yeah.
promotion. because that's, there's no, it's a bit like trickle down economics. It never trickles down, and
Yeah.
it never actually trickles down to mid-list authors. I mean, I talk to lots and lots of mid-list, because most authors would be described as mid-list, if you like.
Yeah.
And they all say pretty much the same thing, whether they're with a big six or they're with an indie or whatever. It's more understandable with a small indie publisher because they haven't got a big budget in the first place. But with a big six, they're still getting really, really minuscule amounts spent on marketing and promotion, even down to they won't really put their hand in their pocket to do a proper launch event or a book tour or anything like that. So, you're kind of on a losing footing right from the get-go, because obviously then the next thing is when you want to put your next book in, or you want to look at if you've got a 2 book deal, when you're looking at book 3, it's like they look at your track record and it's like, well, you didn't do massive numbers, so probably won't take you on, sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's hugely frustrating because obviously, authors we can't just sort of put the book out there and do nothing, but you can do everything right, and then the book doesn't catch on and you don't get the support from the publisher. And the publisher's not going to get put in book jail. The people are not going to say, "Oh, you had a couple of unsuccessful books this year, so we're not going to let you put anything out
Mm.
now." But an author, you might just get the one chance. I have a friend who's recently put out a new novel, but he had to put it out under a pseudonym because they were basically like going by your previous track record of sales, putting it out under your existing name as a non-starter. Um, which it means he's been able to put a book out.
Yeah, yeah.
But the fact that the previous books didn't sell that well and he was in book jail in inverted commas, it's not really his doing.
No.
Um, so yeah, it is a very frustrating landscape, and which is partly why I've ended up going the self-publishing route.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. So yeah, just talk me through that kind of why you did that and how you found the whole thing.
So yeah, basically I got pretty far down the line with two traditional publishers with House on Utopia Way. I worked with two very supportive editors who were really behind the book and really liked it. They did say up front, this is quite out there. We may have issues when we get to the acquisition point, but I'm sort of just describing it as happening concurrently, but it was basically the same sort of experience sort of twice in a row. Um, Worked on the books with them and found the experience was really great and they were very supportive, and then both times we got to acquisitions and just hit a brick wall. And then there were conversations about sort of adjusting the pitch, changing the suggested genre, which didn't really make sense to me, but it was sort of another way of getting it around acquisitions, really. And so a lot of these conversations, but the subtext was that we're going to have to wait for an indeterminate amount of time, try again, and might very well have the same result. And I was sort of a bit downtrodden by that point, because it goes on for such a long time.
That's what I was going to say. That's the biggest thing for me. It's like
There's
you
so much
can't sort
wait,
of
like
move on.
sending an
Yeah.
email and then waiting weeks and weeks and months. And it's everyone's super overworked. So I don't have any bitterness towards, certainly not to maybe the faceless sort of acquisitions department. Maybe I'll sort of shake my fist at them, but certainly the editors, I bear them no ill will
No.
at all. Because everyone's just totally up against it, and everyone's getting hundreds more emails than they can possibly reply to. But on an individual level, it's very demoralizing. And it also it has ripple effects in terms of your general creative works. So you feel like you just don't have the mental energy to go off and start another project. Because you're like, if I can't even get this project off the ground,
Totally. Yeah.
it's not really a very productive use of my time. Especially if you're a sort of a freelancer and you're needing to focus on the work that is actually paying.
Yeah, that's right.
But at the same time, I really wanted to get the book out there, and I was kind of wedded to the idea that getting it through a traditional publisher was the proper way to do things, I guess. I still had the not that I was sort of looking down on self-publishing, but it felt like an admission kind of giving up, in a
Yeah,
way.
I totally relate to that. I was exactly the same, and it's one of those validation things as well. You sort of, I do think that definitely people have definitely changed their attitudes towards it, and I'm in a
Yeah,
couple of like private Facebook groups or whatever with traditionally published authors, self-published authors, and all that, and you can tell there's a lot more traditionally published authors now that are getting really curious about it, about self-publishing, because they're kind of beaten down by the
yeah,
system and they've had multiple books. They're not making a lot of money, but they're also haven't got any sort of full creative control. They don't have any say over anything really. A lot of the time, that like you mentioned earlier with bigger publisher, you don't get to have any input on the cover. Sometimes, quite often, the title, even how
yeah.
it's marketed, how it's pitched, any of those things. And then you're expected to go out and do the legwork anyway. So one of the things that my thought process with it was, there was the time I was spending waiting around for people to get back to me, and it was, as you say, it's months and months and months to get back to it. And B, I thought, well, hang on, if I'm gonna have to do all the marketing and all the other stuff anyway, then I may as well just have a go at doing it myself.
Yeah.
And I was a bit reticent when I first did it, but as soon as I actually started doing it and I saw all the different things I could directly influence, I absolutely loved it. I mean, how have you found it from that point of view?
I've enjoyed the decision to do it. Felt really good after I was at a real low point with it where I was like, maybe this is just not happening. Maybe I had my shot and it just didn't work out for whatever reason. So I was at that kind of stage. And a few people had said, "Well, you should just put it out yourself." And I was nervous about the idea. I was a bit scared, naturally, and it from people who I had spoken to who had gone the self-publishing route, they were like, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of like the promote and that, as previously stated, I hate the promotional side of things because I'm just very bad at it. Was just at a festival at the weekend with a friend who had just read the book, and he kept on sort of trying to get me
I,
to talk to
I,
other people
I've
about.
got a friend that does that with me as well.
And I really appreciated it, but I was just immediately like, oh,
Yeah,
it's whatever, blah, blah, blah.
it's fine. Yeah,
Just don't, if you want to, but there's no pressure whatsoever. So I'm
yeah,
just naturally not good at it. But the decision, I was like, right, I believe in this book, and I think also the fact that I'd got so far through the process with these two like professional editors, I was like, they think the book is good enough.
yeah. And you've had all that work on it and everything. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
So I was, I've kind of had the editorial process kind of
Yeah,
for free.
which is a massive, yeah, exactly, which is a massive thing. If you haven't got either editors or a lot of writing friends that can actually look things over and give you constructive feedback and help you polish something, when you're an indie published author, then you're going to struggle. You're either going to have to pay for it, or
You either have to fork out or you have to rely on the sort of kindness of other writer
yeah,
friends. And
yeah,
in general, writers are very, very
yeah,
generous with their time, and I'm always open to giving my author friends feedback. I think it's just a nice thing to do to support
mm,
each other. And I think it's good for like your practice as well.
yeah, I agree. Yeah,
As I also do editing and manuscript assessments and stuff, it's always useful for me as well as sort of wanting to be helpful. So yeah, I felt that the book was in a strong shape, and that also if I didn't get it out there in some fashion, I was just going to feel like I was just stuck in limbo in this rut. So I just went, right, yeah, I'm going to put it out next year, and that felt very freeing. I could set my own timetable, and I could just. I sort of like the buck. I was like the buck stops with me. I can work out sort of if there are issues. I know at what point in the pipeline the issues are cropping up. Because there are so many unknowns in traditional publishing as well. Like we say with the email thing, you're sort of waiting to find out why something hasn't happened or when
yeah,
something is happening, if it is even happening.
yeah.
And you just never quite know where you are in the process a lot of the time. So that was quite appealing. Um, went out to quite a few people seeking out like review coverage and stuff, and was pleasantly surprised by how many people got back to me and were very enthusiastic, because reviewers and bloggers get so many submissions, um, even just traditionally published ones, and the ones who are sort of generous enough to also consider self-publishing. That's just more floodgates to open.
Yeah.
But was very sort of gratified by the support, and the book has had a bunch of really positive reviews, which has been also been very validating. And yeah, I worked with a friend on a cover. I didn't actually know he was a cover designer. He was someone who I'd got to know through Twitter, now X, the Everything app, which I no longer use.
No, me
It's a
either.
complete cesspit.
Yeah.
But I just got to know him through that. But similarly, he's not great at self-promotion. And earlier this year, he put a post on Blue Sky saying, "I never tell people this, but I actually design book covers. Here's my portfolio."
Yeah.
And I looked at it and I was like, "Wow, these are great. He's
Yeah.
really good. Why is this the first I'm hearing about this?" And amongst it was really varied as well. And he'd done some stuff that was sort of kind of pulp throwback sort of vibe, some stuff that was more weird and surreal. And I was like, wow, you've sort of covered all the aesthetics that I would want in a cover for this book. So I emailed him and we had some really great back and forth. And he sent me over a few ideas, and very quickly found the concept that I really liked and that was really strong. I think that was the sort of one of the first points where it felt like, okay, I've actually got a project here, when it
Yeah.
has to have its
Yeah.
own sort of visual identity, and it was something that I could post and sort of start building up a little bit of anticipation, and had a lot of support from friends and fellow writers, sort of sharing the book and pre-ordering and offering quotes and stuff. So that's been very nice. And people who'd read my previous books who sort of said, "Oh, great, really excited to read a new one," which is just I'm like, wow, it's sometimes it's very easy to feel like you're just kind of shouting into a void. So it was nice to discover, oh no, actually, there are people out there who are interested in.
Yeah, and I think the thing that you don't realize when you're this side of it, when you're the writer side of the fence, if you like, as opposed to the reader, right? The people that are most bothered about whether something is self-published or traditionally published are writers.
Yeah,
Readers don't care. I mean, and
yeah,
I do a lot of in-person events where I go to like festivals where you basically set your stall out and you meet people and you sign books and all the rest of it. And as long as your book looks professional and it's in a genre that appeals to whoever happens to come up, if they're into sci-fi or if they're into horror or then crime or whatever it is, it just never comes up. Very, very occasionally, but usually what I tend to find is they're a writer of some. They'll say so. Eventually they'll go so. They'll look at like, because I do it under my imprint, but sometimes they go, so is this with a small publisher or did you publish it or whatever? But most readers, they just don't care. They like the look of the book, and you'll find the same thing, when you going out with this, I should imagine. So what would you say has been the biggest thing that you've learned along the way as regards the self-publishing, and do you want to do it again?
I'm still learning really. I think the biggest lesson I think is that it's possible. It felt very, very daunting. And I mean, I'm in quite a lucky position as well, in that my dad is a retired graphic designer,
Brilliant.
which is just a impossibly valuable resource for helping with the typesetting. And because my plan was, because my old job, I worked on a couple of magazines, so I had some InDesign experience. I knew my way around it enough, that I was thinking I would quite like to try and take on as much of that side of it as possible, and try and make this as much of a DIY project as I can. So I thought that would just be a good learning experience, and it would feel nice as well. But I got into a real bottleneck with other work, sort of a couple of months before publication, and just looking at the calendar and feeling sort of at the edge of burnout with this other stuff. I was
Yeah.
like, I don't think I can do this.
Yeah.
Certainly not to a standard that would be worth putting out. So I basically called my dad and said, because he was sort of helping and kind of like helping me sort of shepherd it on,
Mm.
but sort of in a guidance capacity. But I basically said, I can't do this. I'm not going to be able to get it out on time. And so luckily, he was able to take on a lot of the technical and typesetting side of things. So I know a lot of writers would not be lucky enough to have that kind of support. So I've definitely felt in a kind of privileged position in certain respects. But the whole project has made me realize that it is possible to do. And it's rather than giving up, it's worth just getting the book out there because even if now it doesn't sort of take off, or I don't manage to break through in the way, I'm not even sure what I imagine breaking through to look like. It's still very much learning as I go. But the book is out there, and I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of having done it. And next time I do it, which I think I'm currently working out what my next project would be. I've got a few works in progress that I've sort of abandoned over the years, and I'm just it's quite nice now having the mental space to actually think
Yeah.
about a future project. I've learned enough that next time I do it, it will look different. I think I'm going to need more of a marketing plan. Unfortunately, next time I try to do as much kind of pre-hyping it up as possible, but within my it's so frustrating that the last 10 years has sort of, like, social media platforms have kind of made themselves completely indispensable and just choked off so many other channels,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
but they're also now all crap.
Yeah.
So so
They
they've
just
made
completely flooded. It's more or less impossible to stand out unless you,
yeah,
I don't know, it's very tricky. I mean,
yeah,
you sort of have
post
to
to
pay, yeah.
limit.
I mean, I have to pay for Amazon ads because otherwise I just don't think I'd sell any books after the initial, the kind of organic thing and the word of mouth. My most successful my successful kind of approach really has been doing more of these in-person things,
Mm.
both in terms of building up fans and people that are actually into, I've done a couple where I've done it more than once, done the same place more than once, and I've had a person come back and say, "Oh, I read the first one, can I get the second one?" Which is great. Um,
Yeah, being able to talk to somebody in person. I'm a
Definitely.
poet as well, and I've always found that I sell way more books after a gig
Yeah.
than doing anything through social media
Yeah.
or even I should not used ads for poetry books, but yeah, getting up and being able to sort of deliver a sample of the writing and then have a chat to people afterwards. I think making that kind of personal connection, because
Definitely.
on there's so many not just authors but artists of every kind just trying to break through on every social media platform that it's as a consumer, I think you just start to, I mean, I find it I start to blank out at a certain point, so I
Mm,
probably miss loads of stuff that I would enjoy,
yeah.
just because it's like your eye sort of trains itself to notice a post that is promotional.
Yes,
It's like
that's
you
right.
just sort of, as you're scrolling, it's like you just kind of know before you've
Just
even
flick
really,
past it. Yeah.
and so you just sort of automatically move. So I can't really complain about other people missing my post because I'm missing so many.
That's exactly how I feel. I'm exactly the same. Just feel like a big hypocrite.
Yeah,
Uh,
but there's only sort of so much you can. I try to sort of offer as much support as I can, and I think trying to get more. I've become kind of, apart from a few kind of core writer friends over the years, I've come a little bit isolated from the broader writing community, which, and just even putting aside just like the promotional side of things, I think that's something that I would like to try and make more effort with, and try and expand my circle, because I think it is such a solitary practice. It's just nice to sort of feel like you're not alone, and to boost other people and for there to be that support. Because I think more and more authors are finding that the support is just not there in the traditional model. As yeah, everyone within working at publishers, they're all overworked and they just don't have the budget or the time or the bandwidth. So I think writers need to stick together and sort of lift each other up. So I think that's something that I want to try and pursue more, get to more events, and just meet more people. Even inevitably, it's whenever you get a bunch of writers together, they will end up complaining, which is kind of what we've done here. But
Exactly. Yeah. You can't help it. We all need to vent. Because the thing with it is as well is a lot of the time, you can't really do this. You can't really speak to readers about it because they don't care and they don't want to hear it. Right. Rightly so.
rightfully so.
Yeah, exactly.
Life's too short to listen to writers complaining about writing.
So would you recommend the indie route for other writers? What would you say if one of you writer friends asked you about it? What would you say if you could sum it up in a couple of sentences?
I would say it is worth trying. It is a route that is available. It brings plenty of its own challenges. You do have to spend a bit of money. I've sort of been trying to keep a very close eye on how much I've been spending, and I have broken even,
That's good. Yeah, really good.
which is a nice feeling.
Yeah,
So yeah, there's plenty of investment in time, some investment in money, but it is, I think, especially if you are at a point where you're feeling very downtrodden with the traditional way of things, and that is sapping your creative energy in general. I think it's good to make that decision and give it a go, because at the very least it means that that book that is becoming a bit of a lodestone can be out there in the world and can hopefully be read by a lot of people. But even if it isn't, you have put it out there, and you can sort of free up a bit of mental space to work on something else.
definitely. So on the subject of books, one of the segments that I do is
It's the book. It's the book that saved my life. Saved my life. Yeah, it's the book. It's the book that saved my life.
so if I said that to you, what does that kind of bring to mind?
Well, yeah, when you emailed me telling me about that segment, the first book that came to my mind was the first of the His Dark Materials trilogy, Northern Lights, or the Golden Compass for overseas readers. I said that I was quite a voracious reader as a child, and so I was always reading a sort of couple of years above my sort of average reading age. But then I was given Northern Lights for, I think, for Christmas when I was, I want to say 9. And it was the first time I remember trying to get into a book and realizing this is a bit beyond me, but in an exciting way, not in a sort of daunting way, but in a wow, I know that this is really exciting, and that
Yeah,
there's some, even though I I couldn't quite get, it took me a couple of attempts to get into it. It might have even been sort of a year or so later that I actually managed to get through it properly. But there was just something about it that was really exciting. And I could tell that it was doing stuff that no novel that I'd read previously was doing. And it was like I could sort of feel like if I can kind of crack this, if I can unlock this, then I'm unlocking a whole other world really, which was quite apropos for that series. But that sense of energy, and then that was also sort of inspiring in terms of feeding into my own creative practice. And I certainly started a lot of fairly bad knockoffs of Northern Lights once I'd got through it. But yeah, that was a real sort of. I could feel that it was good. Not that I knew the phrase game changer at the time, but I could feel like it was going to be a game changer um, when I developed the bandwidth, or however when you want to put it, to get through it. And then when I did get through it, I really loved it. And then the rest of the series also really loved.
yeah,
So yeah, that was the one that came to mind.
yeah, I agree. I hadn't really thought about that, but I think you're right. That thing about reading just beyond your reading age, I can remember doing that in sort of my early teens and reading some. I might have even read Salem's Lot or something like that.
Yeah,
And I was reading it, and I don't just mean from like, the dark sort of themes of it. The way that it was written, it was very long. It was quite complicated in places, but I could tell that it was good. And I like the atmosphere of it. Like when I think back to when I read that book the first time, I couldn't probably tell you loads of stuff that happened in it, but I just remember the way that it made me feel when I was reading it, if you know what I mean.
yeah, you're not picking up on a lot of the subtext or even the text potentially.
Yeah, that's right.
You can just feel that there's something going on there. I think that's the mark of a real master storyteller.
Mm.
That just it is like the, not to sort of, I don't know, mysticize it too much, but it is like there is an energy in the book. There's some kind of electricity crackling in there that you can pick up on, even if you're not getting a lot of what's there.
Definitely, I agree. So as we move towards kind of wrapping things up, what would you say has been the most useful or inspiring bit of advice that you've been given along the way? And it doesn't have to be really specific to writing. It might just be something that was to do with creativity or anything else. But what comes to mind?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a big question. Um, in terms of advice, I think I think learning the importance of editing. It's kind of a boring one. It's not sort of the kind of advice that you're going to put on a fridge magnet or anything. But I can't even remember which tutor it would have been who, because I think we did a couple of different editing modules, and I think the first one would have been in first year. But broadly, like learning the importance of going back and editing, because I before uni I was very much a proponent of the first draft, is this kind of holy object.
Yeah,
That's where the creative spark is, and I couldn't possibly compromise it or dilute it in any way. But learning the importance of honing and crafting, and getting your story or poem or book into the best possible shape, was really valuable. And now I actually really enjoy editing. It's one of my favorite parts of the
yeah, me
process,
too.
which when I talk to a lot of aspiring authors, they're often quite surprised by that, because they're like, "Really, I hate it. That's like the boring bit.
Yeah, and a lot of
that's
a
the
lot of
bad bit."
authors that I speak to that are published, that they'll say the same thing. They're like, "Oh my God, I absolutely hate the edit." But I think I love it because I can actually see the book getting better. I can feel it
Yeah,
sort of getting tighter, and you can really hone in on certain things. And you think, right, I can really focus on that and bring that out and cut that other thing back. And just the way that sometimes you'll get some kind of like a game changing thing where you suddenly realize, or somebody makes you aware of, might
yeah,
say, you've got this character I had something with my last book, and it was essentially you've got this character you've got them as a POV character, but nothing really happens in their story. It just feels like you've got them in there because you wanted to have this person as a POV character. And when they said it, I was like, yeah. And it's really obvious as well in hindsight.
yeah.
And
It's
sometimes
amazing
you
what the
can
second
need
pair
that.
of eyes can do.
Yeah,
Sometimes, and it's like it was staring you in the face, but yeah,
yeah.
you're just too close to it.
Yeah, definitely. So that definitely helps. Okay, well, as we kind of wrap things up, just remind people about the book again, where they can find it, and also where they can find more information about you.
Yeah, well, you can get the paperback version of House on Utopia Way, The House on Utopia Way. Get the title of your own book right, Stefan. I told you I can't do self-promotion. Can't even get the title right. And you can order the paperback directly through my website, which is stefmo, stefmo.co.uk. You can also get the ebook version from Amazon or from Kobo, but we're also putting out a special edition version of the ebook with Scarlet Ferret. So that's going to include a couple of special features. There's an exclusive short story that I've written, which is set in the world of the book, and also a couple of alternate cover designs. So that's going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, brilliant.
And yeah, I'm on Blue Sky and Instagram, both Stefmo Words, if you want to see what I'm rambling about. And yeah, stefmo.co.uk has information about sort of all the various other bits and pieces that I do.
Brilliant. Well, I'll put all of those in the show notes. But for now, thanks for being in the right place, Stefan.
Thanks so much for having me on. It's been lovely chatting.
There you go. Thanks again to Stefan, and I'll put all of his info in the show notes. Don't forget to check out wkwproductions.co.uk or Picklock Publishing if you prefer, to find out how I can help you get that book published and out into the world. Otherwise, that's it for this week, other than me reminding you to drop me a line at wayne@waynekellywrites.com to tell me what you want to see in future shows, or just vent or explain how your writing is going at the minute. And obviously, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from, and keep giving me nice ratings and reviews, because it does help other people to find the show, and just keep telling your friends about it. That'd be brilliant. Otherwise, thanks for listening. I'm Wayne Kelly. Happy writing, stay safe, and I'll see you next time in The Right Place.